Okay, so in this final video, I want to show you how you can extract from a final data set sub-data sets that you may want to use for descriptive or analytical or inferential statistics. So here we have our final data set, which is a stacked time series starting from Afghanistan all the way down to Zimbabwe. And we have a country code, the year, an ID, the region as a categorical variable, and the others like GDP per capita, natural resource rents, gender parity index, poverty, disability adjusted life years attributable to child and maternal malnutrition, income inequality, the Gini coefficient, polity 2, and the armed conflict total score. These are all quantitative variables. So a strategy in downloading data is always to download as much as you can. So we used as a reference case the World Bank Development Indicators time series or time range from 1960 to 2020, and we limited our observations to the countries included in the World Bank Development Indicators database. So we have now all the data that we could download, but as you browse through the data set, well, there are many missing observations, and you definitely will not work with this data set and download it and somehow upload it into a statistical software analysis program and start running regressions with something like this. Chances are very high that you have to still manipulate the data set like this. And I want to show you three methods or three sub-data sets that you may likely want to generate from this panel data set. The first one is a panel, a different panel. What you see in front of you on the screen is a panel data. It is a stacked time series, but very often it makes sense maybe just to limit the observations to the last 10, 15 years and also average out some of the observations. So the first thing I'd like to show you is how can I make a different panel from our from this data set here. So maybe I just call sheet 1 the mother file, and now I want to create a different sheet, and I called it 5-year, maybe 5-year average panel or so. So what I want to do is I want to take the average of only 5 years. So in order to do that, what you do is you highlight what I call now the mother file, and I copy it into that 5-year average panel. So now we have duplicated the data set twice, and now I delete all the observations in the copied file, and let's say I want to have only a 5-year average. Maybe I'll also see here, maybe let's fit to content first. Okay, so let's say what I want is I want the average from let's say 2016 to 2020 and 2011 to 2015 and 2006 to 2010 or so. So I want to take always of all the observations a 5-year average. So in order to do that, I first, so you can see that a little bit better, I quickly freeze the top row. Okay. So technically what we want to do is whenever we have the year 2020, what we actually want is the average of the 5 observations that we get from what we call the mother file in this case. So we go to Afghanistan 2020, and I go also to column Y. Actually, let me also put in here and freeze the first row. So, okay. So in other words, so let's go back. So I want in the 5-year average panel file the average of GDP per capita for 5 years. So those would be those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values from 2016 to 2020. Okay. And I would like to do that for every 5 years. Beginning, so I want to get the 2016 to 2020 average, then the 2011 to 2015 average, and the 2006 to 2010. So the way to do it is as follows. So what we do is we go to the first year for which I want to, where I want to place an average. So I want to place the average next to the year 2010, but it is supposed to be the average of 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then I want to do the same thing for the average from 2011 to 2015, and then from 2016 to 2020. So the way to do that in Excel is to say if, and then we add or. Okay. So now we say if the year, which is C52, and now I need to put a little $ in front of that C, because if I copy that formula to the right, I don't want the column C to move to column D. But because I also copy down that formula, I do not want to freeze row 52. So now we say, okay, if this year is either equal to 2010, or, and now I just copy this term again, if it is equal to 2015, or if it is equal to 2020, then I want the average of the 5 years of 2020 and the 4 years before. So now I just click again into the mother file, and I click on 2020, and now I just want the average of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So from 2016 to 2020. Okay, so far the Excel formula reads, if the year in the column is either 2010, 2015, or 2020, then give me the average, which we look up in a different sheet. And if the year is not 2010, 2015, or 2020, then just return 2 dots. Okay, so now we are finished. And we have now the average formula for I made a mistake here because obviously 2010 I took the average from 58 to 62, which is obviously for 2020, so let me correct that quickly. So I'll just delete everything again. And I go back to the mother file and I'll just say again average. Go back to the mother file. And I want to go now to the year 2010. And now we go back 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we have the right 5-year average. And if it's not there, enter 2 dots. Okay, so now we have the right number. Okay, so now I can easily copy this formula to the right. So, and then it will get me the average for all the series of variables. So I copied that to the right. Here, poverty, we have probably missing observations. So divide by 0, so nothing is there that we can take the average of. And I can copy down that formula now as well. So I'll just copy down that formula. Okay, and now you see, if you scroll down, we have always an average value, an average 5-year average value for 2020, 2015, and 2010. Okay. And what we also need to do is we have to eliminate, of course, all the rows that we are not interested in. So what I typically do is I go to the first row in which I enter the formula, and I copy the formula one more time to the right. So I press Shift, arrow right, Control R, copy right. And now what I tell Excel is, if the year in column C is either 2010, 2015, or 2020, then give it a 0. Otherwise, comma, give the value a 1. So we should see now a 0. Okay, and now I copy down this formula as well. Okay. And I call this column sort because I will sort by that later. And technically, I don't want those values from Afghanistan 1960 until to the first average either, so I give that ones as well. So I just give that a 1. So whenever you see now a 1, those are values that I'm not really interested in. I'm only interested in the values where I took the average. So what we do first is, or what we do next is, we remove all the formulas, and that's very important because if I remove all the rows that have a 1, but I keep the formula will be recalculated on a different range. So that's what we want to avoid. So we have to remove the formula. So I highlight the entire data set, Control copy, right click, paste special, values. So now the formula is gone. And now I can sort my data set according to the column sort that I created. And I click on sort, sort by, sort smallest to largest, because I want the ones to be pushed down to the bottom. And now we have our panel where we have for each country 3 observations of time, namely the average from 2006 to 2010, from 2011 to 2015, and from 2016 to 2020. So I can now go and delete all the columns that have a 1. So I highlight the sort column, Control F, search for the first one, and I just delete everything that has a 1. Okay. So the data set still looks a little bit unpleasant with all the diffs divided by 0. So let's remove those. So highlight the entire data set, and then we say Control F, number divided by 0, exclamation point, replace by 2 dots. Okay, so now we can also unfreeze the first pane again. So let's go to View and unfreeze panes again. So now we have a panel, and we could have done like a 10-year panel or something else, but you have more data now here, and taking the average in data is often useful in order to somehow smooth out maybe extreme observations or outliers. But yeah, this is how you would create a 5-year average panel. The second thing that I like to show you is sometimes it is important to take only the last observation of a time series. So let's say we take Afghanistan, and let's say I want to build a cross-sectional data set where I have only the latest available observation in there. So now if we take a look at Afghanistan, so the last available observation in the mother file for GDP per capita is from the year 2020. But natural resource rents, the last available observation is 2019. And for GPI, it is 2018, and then dailies it's again 2019. Polity is 2018. So let's assume for all the observations I always just want the last available observation. So in other words, I want to have for Afghanistan only the 1971. For natural resource rents, I want the 0.774. For GPI, the 0.571. Poverty is no data. For dailies, I want the 9,208. For Gini, I want the polity. For Gini, I want the 0.517. For polity, the -1. And for conflict, the 4. So I want to build a cross-section. So we do again the same thing. We highlight the entire data set and create a new sheet, and now we can paste special values. This time I press on the 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we delete again all the observations, and I call this sheet 4 last ops. Okay, so now we need to use a formula, and already earlier I told you that sometimes you need to look for a formula using help from the internet. Some some things that you want to do in Excel, they are quite tricky, and you may have to just look around. There's always a great chance that you have a specific problem that already someone tried to solve. So now I don't have any clue how we can get which formula I could use to extract from every stacked time series for Afghanistan, just the last value. I have no idea. So what I do is I have to go to the internet and search for something like finding the last cell in a column in Excel or so. So I'll just pause here quickly and I will open my browser and let's search for help on the internet. Okay, so now I opened my Google browser and I will search for find value of last cell, and let's see what we get. So there is something called Excel Chat Net. As you can see, I have visited that site before, and there it says get value of last non-empty cell. So very often someone has already solved your problem, and so let's click on this one. So there is this great website called Excel Chat, and it says, okay, get value of last non-empty cell. Oh, okay. And so there is obviously a lookup formula, which I don't really know what it means. But what I would suggest is that you just copy it and try to use it and see what happens. Okay, so I was wondering whether there's a person that we can thank for. So there's Dave Bruns. He runs Excel Chat with his wife Lisa. Okay, so thank you very much for providing all that information, and it's much appreciated. And this is definitely a great website. So let's go back to Excel and let's use Dave and Lisa's formula. So we go again to last observation, and let's go to the last row for Afghanistan. Well, and let's just end and let's see what happens. So equals, and now we enter the formula. Okay, so now we have to work on that one because that doesn't look right. Okay, so it says look up 2,1 range. Okay, so range, Dave and Lisa probably want me to define a range, so that is probably in the mother file. For the first value, the entire range of so from F2 to F62, so that is the entire range for Afghanistan where we have observations. Yeah, so that is correct. And then it says unequal to empty cell. Okay, so well, we don't have empty cells, we have 2 dots, so maybe we want to enter 2 dots. And then it says again range, so let's just see what happens if we enter again the same range from F2 to F62. Okay, so now let's see what happens. So if all goes well, we should now see 1971, which we do. Okay, so let's see what happens if we copy that formula to across. So let's freeze again the top row. And if we copy that formula one more to the right, okay, I don't need to anchor anything, because if I copy it to the right, I want to look things up in the range G2 to G67, right? So let's copy that one. So I copied it down. Let's copy it to the right. So now we get 0.773957. So this seems, let's copy everything to 3 decimals here too. Okay, so 0.774, that seems to be correct, so that seems to work. So let's copy it one more to the right. So now we see 0.571. Okay, it's also correct. So now if we copied one more to the right, we should get an error message because nothing is there, or 2 dots maybe. Let's see. Nothing is there. Okay. And let's just go all the way to the right. Okay, so it really seems 9,208. Okay, so that's probably because of the 0.517 for Gini, 0.517, then a -1 and a 4. Okay, so Dave, really great website. I don't know how I can thank you and your wife Lisa, but I hope that it helps you at least, that if I spread the word a little bit. So this is a great formula. The only thing I want to do is I want to embed that formula now into an if statement, because I only want this formula to run if the year is 2020. So that should be relatively easy. So I just quickly put that into clipboard, I cut it, and now I say if the year is 2020. And now I got to put that little $sign in front of the C because I want to copy that formula to the right. So if the year is equal to 2020, then run Dave's formula and Lisa's formula. And if the year is not 2020, I just want 2 dots. Okay. Oops. Okay. Okay, so that should work. We should see again the same numbers. So let's copy that to the right. So nothing has changed. So I just added a if statement around Dave and Lisa's formula. And last thing I want to do is I want to sort the data set again. And I want to sort it whenever the year is 2020, then I want to give it a 1, and if it's not 2020, then it is a 0. So equals if this year is equal to 2020, then 0, otherwise 1. So that is a 0. And now I should be able to copy down that formula, but because I don't need all the observations for Afghanistan from 1960 to 2019, I can copy that down. And so now I just copy and paste David Lisa's formula down. Okay, so I highlighted the relevant range. So again, I always go arrow left, control arrow down, control shift arrow up. Okay, highlight everything, and now control D, copy down. Okay, so now whenever we have the year 2020, we should get the last available observation. And that seems to have worked. So final step is, as always, let's just remove all the formulas by copying the entire data set over itself. So right click, paste special values. So now Excel chat's formulas are gone. And last step, maybe let's remove again the freeze of the pane. Escape, and now we have to sort and get rid of all the columns that carry a 1. So let's go to data, sort by, column sort, smallest to largest, okay. So now let's delete all the rows that have a 1. So Control F, after highlighting the column, go to the first one, escape, and now we delete all those rows, okay. And I can delete the column where it says sort as well. We still have a bunch of NAs. Those are essentially missing observations. So let's highlight the entire data set. Control F, and let's search for N/A. And let's replace by 2 dots. So now we replaced the 2 dots. And maybe we can just nicify some columns a little bit, but we are now essentially done. And now we have another cross-sectional data set with only the last available observation. Okay, so the third and final thing that I want to do is show you quickly the power of pivot tables. So what we do is we go back to our mother file. We can remove again the panes in this case. And I want to show you now what we can do with the pivot table. Specifically, I want to look at summary statistics for the regions that we have. So we also downloaded the regions. So let's say I want to make a data set only with the regions. So we highlight the entire data set. Then we go to Insert. There's something called Pivot Chart. I always go for some reason to Pivot Chart and Pivot Table. And then I delete the chart. But okay, so now you see you have here the pivot chart fields. And let's say I want to summarize only, or I want to summarize data by region. So what we can do is we grab region, and well, we could put it into the axis. Oh, and now suddenly they show up here. Well, I could have put the regions maybe to legends. Well, then it's show up here. In columns, and axes are the rows. So let's say I want to get summary statistics for the region. Let's say I want to know what is the average income in East Asia and the Pacific. So now I can grab the variable y and put it into values. And now let's see what happens. Now it says the count of y. So that means we had 2,257 observations in total in East Asia and the Pacific. And here there is a table or a chart of that count. So, well, we don't want the count. What we probably want is the regional average. So we can click on that little arrow and go to Value Field Settings and change the count to average. Okay, so now we see that the average income per capita is greatest in North America. It's probably second highest in Europe and Central Asia, and then the Middle East and North Africa. So we can see that. But we can do that for other variables too. Maybe I just want to add the natural resource rents. Okay, so now I get another column, but again, the count. So what we need to do is we have to go back to value field settings and change it to average. And now I can build a table with regional averages. And of course, if you don't like all those decimals, we probably can change that. Okay. So let's go back to my field list. Oops. Okay, here it is. Oops. Okay. Or we can add the gender parity index. Let's do one more. So value field settings, average. Okay. So that's not really a good idea to put everything into one graph, because we can see in one graph the gender parity index, because it is something between 0 and 1. So, but we can tell, okay, the gender parity index is very high in Europe and Central Asia. It's really low in Sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia or the Middle East. So the point here is that we can use pivot tables to make very nice so-called crosstabs with regional averages. The averages that you see now here are averages for all the observations from 1960 to 2010. Well, if you want to limit that a little bit too, which would make sense, maybe the last 5 years, we can add a filter. So we go to filters. So now you see there's a new filter icon here. And let's say I want to get the averages only for the last 5 years. So I can go to select multiple items, and then we first uncheck them all. And I say, okay, I only want the last 5 years. Those are actually 6 years. And so now we get different values, and you see that, for example, the average of the GPI was now much higher. There was like a 0.7 and a 0.8. So, which means that the average from 1960 to 2020 has probably pushed down that average. So we could also, of course, theoretically still add those years. So we can add either the years underneath each region, and then we can see, okay, how did things develop in East Asia and the Pacific, or Europe and Central Asia, or other regions. So those are probably the last things that you will do if you start working on your statistics. Pivot tables will be definitely provide you with a great service in order to get nice summary tables and summary statistics. And yeah, this is pretty much all I can tell you about the final steps in preparing data sets once you have downloaded all the data. So I hope you found it useful, and thanks a lot.